Hello, I'm Ellis Corday and welcome to Queerer, a podcast about queer positivity. Today's episode, the very first one in fact, will be a lot different to how I would usually structure these. If you don't know already, the announcement of this podcast came with an attached form, one that asked for anonymous participants to give their thoughts on certain key areas in queer discussion. These responses would then be intended to be mixed in with weekly queer news to make up the bulk of the podcast. However, as I've said, this first episode will be different. So after the weekly topic segment, today focusing on Trans Day of Remembrance, I will be giving my own answers to these questions. I thought this would be helpful to everyone, so you can know me a bit better and hopefully understand that I'm coming to this project with an honest intent and love for spreading positivity in the queer space. Also, so that you can have an example of what potential answers to these questions are. Anyways, with that little intro out the way, let's get on to our topic this week. This past Thursday was Transgender Day of Remembrance, and I could honestly talk for hours about this, but what I really wanted to focus on was the history of it. It was started all the way back in 1999 by Gwendolyn Ann Smith, Nancy Nangeroni, and Jahira de Auto. It was made to honor the life of Rita Hester and all the other transgender people that lost their life to violence that year. Rita Hester was murdered in 1998. Her death sparked this movement, yet her murder has still not been solved. Rita was black, and so are most of the victims of transgender-related hate crimes. After her murder, Rita was referred to by her dead name in various news articles. This act was done by men like Jeff Epperly, who defended his actions as being proper journalism. Yet, even after the pushback and the hate, the movement persisted. Days after her murder, 50 people marched in protest, and in that same year in response, Gwendolyn Ann Smith created the web project that a year later, with the help of Jahira de Auto, would grow on to become the Transgender Day of Remembrance we know today. At the same time, Nancy Nangeroni started pushing back against the media's seeming ignorance and deliberate misgendering of trans people with her radio program Gender Talk, which was instrumental to the movement. Nancy Nangeroni and Gwendolyn Ann Smith are still alive and doing advocacy to this day. Both are white. Jahira de Auto was murdered in 2021. She was a woman of colour. This year, their work continued to live on, with Trans Day of Remembrance events being held worldwide. This year alone, hundreds of vigils were held in the UK. Not only were events hosted, but they were visited by important political figures representing various different parties. Both the Liberal Democrats and Green Party put out statements of support, as well as individual members such as Green Party leader Zach Polanski, Jeremy Corbyn, and Labour MP Nadia Whittome. However, whilst it's nice that we have political figures caring enough for the trans community to comment at events like this, it ultimately is not about them. It's about the lives lost over the past year and what we can do to get that number down. Now, whilst this podcast is focused on positivity, I think it is very important to state reality. This year, 281 trans and gender non-conforming people were murdered. 90% of those victims were trans feminine, 88% of victims were black or brown people. Trans people are the second most targeted group behind sex workers. Importantly, however, these numbers are down from 2024. Whilst these numbers are horrible and hard to hear, violence is decreasing, and that should be the cause of some sort of happiness. As a trans woman, regardless of how sad I find this day each year, it's so important to me, the fact that people all around the world, trans and cis, all come together to mourn and to respect our dead is so meaningful. People do care, and whilst it's certainly bleak times for trans people at the moment, especially in UK politics, we still have support from so many members of the public. As long as we let our voices be heard, show up, and remember those who sacrificed their lives to live a better life, we will eventually create the change we need. Most people aren't heartless, and whilst it might feel like the world wants you gone, it doesn't. The government can ban us from the bathrooms, stop us from getting life-changing medication, but regardless we will persist. We will continue to support each other, build ourselves up, and advocate for our own lives. We won't stop gathering, and definitely won't stop living our lives the way we want. Even if all we have is hope, that is enough. This movement started with 50 people, and now it's at thousands. It's easy to get caught up in all the hatred, Allow yourself to spiral, but always remember that no matter what is taken from us, we will always have each other. We will always be guided to the future by our dead. If you don't want to continue fighting for yourself, then fight for them, for the people who didn't get the chance to. Keep being yourself and pushing for more rights, because people like Rita Hester never got that. Before we move on from this section and onto the form, I'd like to share some words from Jahara de Alto that she said on the Mother's Day before her murder. I am the mother who raised the children, whose rainbow sparkled too brightly and blinded their birth moms. I cherished what they discarded. I took on earthly assignments for the moms who'd earned their heavenly reward, for their babies who still needed raising. I did that, and I'm still doing that, and I'll keep doing that, because I will never know what seeing my DNA reflected in another's eyes could look like. But I know what gratitude in the eyes of a young person who finally feels seen looks like, and for me, that's enough. Now, before I answer these questions, I want to give you some context about myself. I'm a trans woman, my pronouns are they, she, and I am white. I grew up relatively privileged, my family is middle class and was supportive of my transition. The point of this is not to platform my own voice. It is to give people the opportunity to share their own words. I want to create a space where a diverse selection of queer people can be heard and have the anonymity provided by this space as a safeguard. This leads into a core view of mine. This is not about me in any way besides as a voice for you. The queer movement has been built by people of colour, and they are consistently trampled over and ignored by white voices. I do not plan to be one of these voices in any capacity. I will endeavour to give credit to those who need it, and always acknowledge who is doing the real work for the community. If you ever catch me being reductive or whitewashing in any way, please reach out to me via any platform, and I am more than happy to be held accountable. Now on to the form questions. What are your thoughts about the current attitudes towards queer people present in the UK media and politics? I think the attitude is incredibly alarming, yet not devoid of hope. The efforts and rise of the Green Party, to me, is a huge improvement over what the climate has been these past few years. I personally remember a time where the Green Party weren't committed to trans rights, and neither were any significant political party in the UK. But today, that's one of the key issues they're pushing for, and the Green Party is doing better than ever. In terms of media, I also believe we're sitting at a good point. Shows these days feature queer people regularly in leading roles without it always being a point of discussion. Severance, Pluribus, Gen V, and I'm sure many more that I haven't seen, all feature queer people as major characters. In previous years, this would be a rarity, but now it's almost usual to see a queer person in media. How had this attitude impacted your life as a queer person? I haven't really been impacted by this in my personal life, if I'm honest, as I keep my circle very small and exist relatively offline. However, in my professional life, I have found myself being able to do a lot of projects I don't think my predecessors would be able to do. This project alone, I had the support to do as part of my master's degree, and had the support of my tutor and the university itself. Then, during my time as a filmmaker, I was able to make short films starring trans people or being about the trans experience. I'm incredibly fortunate to be a part of a society where an academic institution is as supportive of these ideas as they are. What elements of current politics and media do you think deserve more attention for their positive work in the queer space? When it comes to politics, I have already mentioned the Green Party, so I'll use this opportunity to mention Consortium. They are a UK-based charity group and do fantastic work in helping grow and develop queer advocacy groups. They are a great hub to both find other groups as well as find events and opportunities happening in the queer space. For media, I would like to mention the YouTuber Verdus Joe. They make some fantastic videos talking about race and queerness in various media forms. I've been watching them for a while now, and they're some of the best videos on the site that discuss these topics in both a well thought out yet humorous way. I'll put the links to both Consortium and Verdus Joe in the description of this episode. When it comes to your queer experience, are there any issues you believe aren't being talked about enough? I think there is this habit, especially in online queer spaces, to talk about past bigotry in an almost joking manner. I have seen this happen, especially with white trans women, where they will bring up unprompted how they used to be far right and racist, and will expect responses to that to either be forgiving or nonchalant. Now I understand that this does happen, and I do not blame the 12-year-old who is filled with self-hatred for turning to extremism. What does need to be addressed is the adult, who now thinks it's okay to mention that, to bring that energy into a place that should be safe from racism. It's almost always white people, who have not yet learned that being part of that didn't just mean they hated themselves, but also other minority groups that are being affected by you ignorantly bringing it up. What are your thoughts about how queer identity has been represented in the media, and are there any identities you feel are underrepresented? Most people when answering this, I feel, will jump to asexual people and trans men, which I do think are incredibly underrepresented, and even when they are, it is usually in a very minor way, with little focus on their actual identity. However, I do believe intersex people are both underrepresented and widely misrepresented. I don't believe I have seen any good representation for them, and any representation I have seen for intersex people has been incredibly bigoted and mired in misinformation. The film Conclave did feature an intersex plot recently. However, myself and intersex voices in the space feel that was mismanaged. It acted as a plot twist and the word intersex wasn't even mentioned in the film. In relation to how queer identity intersects with other aspects of identity, such as race or religion, do you find there to be any problems within the queer community when it comes to tackling these other aspects? It should be hopefully obvious, listening to what I've already said, but I think it is hugely important to make people of colour feel seen and acknowledged in the queer space. And I in fact think that the queer community today has a massive racism problem. Whenever I attend queer events, there's a severe lack of people of colour, and maybe that's an issue just for Winchester, but I strongly do not think this. There is a habit I have noticed with white queers to make racist jokes that aren't really jokes and just disguised actual racism. This habit makes queer spaces alienating for people of colour and pushes them out of the community. This needs to be addressed, and everyone needs to check themselves more when it comes to this kind of behaviour, because to me it's unacceptable. How has being queer affected your life in a positive way? Being queer has genuinely changed my life for the better in every conceivable way. It has brought me friends that love me for who I am, and a version of me that is happy and able to live life to the fullest each day. It has given me a perspective on the world that I would not trade for anything. It has made me a better person, and I am beyond grateful for the fact that this is the life I've been fortunate enough to lead. Being queer to me isn't something I wish I wasn't. Regardless of the hardships it has brought me, it is still the best thing about me, and I will shout it as loud as I can at every possible point in my life. This project is about showcasing positivity amidst an admittedly troubling period for queer people. When it comes to that mission statement, do you believe that is the best approach, or are there criticisms or questions you have about the project? As the person that made this project, it's obvious that I agree with my own mission statement. However, it's important to note that I'm never going to value positivity over reality. If things are going bad, I will say so, but I will always encourage everyone to view events as positively as they can. Plenty of podcasts and outlets focus on the onslaught of hatred and the more reportage side of things, but I do not want this podcast to be that. I want it to be a place where you can come each week to feel hopeful. If you have any questions and don't want to fill out the form, I would encourage you to email me at e.corday.22@unimail.winchester.ac.uk. Now, on to the final question, and then today's episode will be wrapped up. This project includes a literary trail, where we post anonymously submitted written pieces both to the podcast and in public spaces around the University of Winchester. If you would like to write one of these letters, please include it in the space below. The content of this letter should be positive and reflects what you want the future to know in regards to being queer and queer identity. Now, this question can seem a bit daunting at first. However, once you break it down, it's relatively simple. Just a couple sentences or more. Really, the length's up to you, and all that's needed is reflection on what you want the future to either learn or know about the queer experience. I like to think of it as a letter to myself and what my hopes for the future are. Now, I'll get into what my message is. Dear future, I'm hoping that things are better. That kids no longer live in fear of being themselves. That people like me aren't being attacked just for existing. It almost feels unfair living in the now, that I don't get to have this future. But I guess that's what every generation has felt. all would be so lucky to live in the world that I now inhabit. So I at least hope you're no longer feeling that we're at a point where you're not hoping for a better future, but that you are in that future, and you are happy. So that brings us to the end of this first episode. I hope you enjoyed it, or it at least made your day a bit better. I'll put the links to everything I've discussed and all my sources in the description. You'll also find the form both there and on our Instagram account, which is just called the Queerer Podcast. If you want to get in contact with me about the show, either send me over an email or contact the Instagram. Otherwise, just keep an eye around Winchester campus for our letters, and hopefully you'll hear from me again next week, where we can have a more regular episode discussing the content of your forms. So that's it from me. Goodbye, and have a great rest of your week.